Welcome to Bad at Goodbyes. Each week on our show, we spotlight species from the IUCN Critically Endangered Red List. These are plants and animals with decreasing populations, nearing the edge of extinction. We'll share species research, information, and conservation proposals. And then we'll spend the bulk of the show opening and holding a space for contemplation and awe. We'll perform a kind of meditative sound bath, a soundscape of gentleness, quietude, reflection, and perhaps mourning. There's a very low likelihood that any of these species will survive the 21st century. And so perhaps we might acknowledge their passage with a moment of our attention, a recognition of our kinship, and with a commitment to personal and systemic change. Thank you for listening. On today's show, we consider the axolotl. The axolotl is a critically endangered amphibian native to southern North America in Mexico City. Full-grown adult axolotl can range in size from 6 to 18 inches in length, with an average size of 9 inches. Their bodies are cylindrical and elongated. They have a broad, flat head. Wild axolotl are typically a swirling brown color or black with gold speckles. One of their most distinctive features is the 3 pairs of feathery external gill stalks that protrude from the sides of their head. These gills allow them to breathe underwater, while their underdeveloped lungs are also functional, allowing them to take occasional gulps of air at the water's surface. They have barely visible vestigial teeth. Their primary method of feeding is by suction. They have 4 short, underdeveloped legs with 4 toes on their front feet and 5 toes on their hind feet. These digits are long and very thin. Their tail is long and narrow, with a fin that extends from behind their head to the tip of their tail. This is an anatomy built for speed, and when threatened, the axolotl can swim up to 10 miles an hour. The axolotl has a fairly unique and highly specialized adaptation. It does not heal by scarring and is capable of the regeneration of entire lost appendages, regrowing limbs like in a matter of months. It can even regenerate more complex structures, such as parts of their central nervous system and tissues of the eye, heart, and brain. Axolotl have relatively simple eyes compared to other animals. They do not have eyelids, meaning their eyes are constantly exposed, making them sensitive to light and primarily adapted for detecting movement and changes in light intensity rather than like forming sharp images. And so instead they rely on other senses, like their lateral line system, which is a network common to many salamanders of specialized sense receptors along their head and body that is highly attuned to vibration, specifically water movement. They can sense changes in water currents through these receptors on their skin. Their lateral line receptors also can perceive low-frequency sound and sense the weak electrical fields generated by other organisms. And so between their eyes, ears, sense of smell, and this specialized lateral line system, the axolotl is able to navigate, hunt, communicate, mate, and escape predation in the dim, murkiest waters of its habitat. The axolotl is native only to the freshwater of Lake Xochimilco and previously Lake Chalco, both in Mexico City. Lake Chalco no longer exists, having been drained as a flood control measure over the first approximately 70 years of the 20th century. Lake Xochimilco persists, but only as a remnant of its ancient self, mainly now as canals and a few developed and urbanized bodies of water in the middle of the Parque Ecologico de Xochimilco, which includes playgrounds, soccer fields, and spaces for wedding receptions. Summer temps in this habitat average in the 80s in the summer and winter lows in the mid-40s. The region experiences a moderate annual rainfall, averaging around 27 inches, with the majority falling between June and October. The region is historically characterized by chinapis. This is an ancient agricultural technique that involved interweaving reeds and mud to create artificial islands on these like raised beds of fertile soil. And in these floating gardens, they were used to cultivate crops. They were first constructed during the Aztec Empire at least 600 years ago. And so this land has been shaped by our species for a very long time. In the dream, I visit New York to Mexico City. And in the dream, because it is a dream, I am there suddenly. Without the long journey and any of the trifling complexities that keep us apart. Our days together are unworried, talking and cooking small meals. We stroll revolucion, we sing in the evenings, we walk in the park. We walk in Park Xochimilco, never knowing how close we were, how close we are to something so precious. So close to something so precious in the dream. The actual bed of Lake Xochimilco is primarily composed of volcanic rock and sediment, with varying depths and a mix of submerged vegetation and open water areas that support aquatic plants like water lilies, alodia, duckweed, and common reeds and rushes. This habitat is shared with local fauna like frog and heron and squirrel and snail and egret and fish like the chirales and the mexiclipique, alongside introduced fish species like tilapia and carp. A variety of invertebrates, insects, crustaceans, and mollusks live in and near these waters. Axolotl are carnivorous, and their diet mainly consists of these small invertebrates, mosquito larvae, mollusk, water flea, brine shrimp, small clams, and even occasionally small fish. They are ambush predators, which means they lie in wait for their prey rather than actively chasing it. And so they use their specialized senses to detect and their suction feeding to then capture their prey. So once detected, they create this like suction force that draws the prey into their mouth along with water. And their mouths are lined with these small backward-facing vestigial teeth that help prevent the prey from escaping. So after capturing the prey, they close their mouths and they swallow it all whole. They cannot chew, and so they rely on digestive enzymes to break down the food in their stomachs. They typically hunt at night when their prey is most active, and they are opportunistic feeders, meaning they will consume like any available food within their size range. Axolotl are solitary and do not exhibit complex social structures. However, they do coexist peacefully in groups as long as there's enough space and food. These occasional interspecies interactions also occur mainly during courtship and mating. During breeding season, axolotl use pheromones to attract mates and communicate. In courtship, males perform a kind of dance by vigorously fanning their tail to waft pheromones towards prospective females. Females have been observed performing like subtle body movements that seem to indicate receptivity. And so once receiving that sort of receptive signal, the male then deposits small cone-shaped packets of sperm on the bottom of the lake. The female intakes that sperm into her reproductive organ, and her eggs are then fertilized internally. Within 1 to 3 days of mating, the female lays hundreds of eggs, attaching them to aquatic plants or other kind of like bottom surfaces. The eggs hatch within 2 to 3 weeks, And the young, though vulnerable, are capable of surviving on their own. Initially for food, they absorb their yolk sacs while developing their external gills, starting to swim and exploring their environment. And then after a few days, they will begin to actively seek food and will gradually begin to develop their limbs. By around 6 to 8 weeks of age, they will resemble miniature versions of adult axolotls, and then they will reach reproductive adulthood after about 1 year. Most amphibian begin their lives as aquatic offspring, unable to live on dry land. We often call these tadpoles, right? And then to reach adulthood, they will go through metamorphosis, in which they lose their gills, leave the water, which they generally only return to breed. Axolotl are unusual. They rarely metamorphose, and they retain certain larval characteristics, including keeping their gills into their reproductive adulthood. And in general, they live their lives entirely underwater. The estimated lifespan on average for the axolotl is 6 years. Human encroachment due to development and urbanization has substantially shrunk the axolotl's native habitat, and what remains is threatened by multiple stressors. Pollution, stemming from agricultural runoff and untreated urban wastewater, has degraded the water quality in their habitat. The introduction of non-native species like the tilapia and carp also has disrupted their ecosystem. This creates new competition for resources, and these larger fish prey upon axolotl eggs and young. The small size of the wild population has also resulted in a loss of genetic diversity. This is called a genetic bottleneck. And it makes the species more susceptible to disease and less adaptable to environmental changes, such as the effects of human-induced climate change. Axolotl is protected by the Mexican government to prohibit the capture, possession, or trade of wild axolotl without proper permit. Current conservation efforts are focused on captive breeding programs, habitat restoration, and public awareness campaigns. Researchers are also exploring the potential of reintroducing captive bred individuals into suitable habitats, both within their native range and outside of it. This is a strategy called translocation. The axolotl was added to the IUCN Red List of critically endangered species in 2020, and its population is currently in decline. It is estimated that less than 1,000 axolotl remain in the wild. Research for today's show was compiled from the IUCN San Diego Zoo, Animal Diversity Web from the University of Michigan, and from Wikipedia. So in a moment, I would like to perform some music in hopes of opening a space to be in contemplation of the other lives with whom we share our little earth. But first I want to state specifically that this music is not like for the axolotl. The axolotl is not a vessel from which I intend to extract meaning or want to put meaning upon. Instead, I hope this music can serve to express my very human sense of awe, and to be a means to consider my own relationship to all other life, but in particular, life that may be nearing extinction. So I will sit in a space of sound, awe, contemplation, and reflection, and I warmly invite you to join me. I honor the life force of the axolotl. I will endeavor to hold its name in awe and remembrance gently on my lips. I am so grateful to have shared time on our small, bright planet with this remarkable little being. I lament the ways in which I and my species have harmed and diminished this species. And so, in the name of the axolotl, I pledge to reduce my consumption, to reduce my carbon footprint, and to curb my wastefulness. I pledge to acknowledge and attempt to address the costs of my actions and my inactions. And I pledge to resist the harm of any kin or their habitat by corporations and governments. I pledge my song to the witness and memory of all life, to a broad celebration of biodiversity, and to the total liberation of all beings. This has been Bad at Goodbyes. Thank you for listening. Until next time, let's take care of each other and all of our kin. Goodbye.